Yep, guess who? Steve from offthegridnoz.com. This one's part of the building series that we're trying to get together to give people a few clues. This one is going to be on pole construction. Pole construction is pretty popular. I actually like it. A few clues with pole construction is what this first video is about. Pole construction is one of those things in the building industry. There's what's called a plus or minus in level, plus or minus in square. Orthodox buildings are not dead square, even though they would have you believe they are. There is always a plus and minus. The average house, there's a rule of thumb with standard building processes, and that is level across any particular house, average house, of about, the old days they used to call it a half an inch, 12 mil. I like to get a bit closer than that, but with pole construction, a lot of that stuff goes out the window. Alright, now pole construction's a funny sort of a process. Obviously you're dealing with a material that's natural. All of these poles here, they're all treated pine. You might be using hardwood. Hardwood poles take a little bit of preparation. Don't just go throw a hardwood pole in the ground. The termites will love you. But longevity, well, 10 years time you might be looking back and regretting that. Hardwood poles, you have to do something like your creosote. You can get additives to deal with the base of the pole that goes in the ground. Treated pine, on the other hand, well, the termites don't like it. I've worked on for clients lots of mud brick homes that have got pole construction components to them, and those poles that were put in the ground that were hardwood, quite often after a number of years they get a bit second-hand. The termites get into them. Bit of creosote or a bit of treatment. Just do a bit of research. There are a few different things you can do, a few different processes you can go through if you're going to use normal hardwood, but for the sake of this video I use treated pine. Now treated pine can go straight in the ground. Now back to the plus or minus with pole construction. Pole construction, natural material still, which means they're not dead straight. It means they're not dead the same diameter all the way through. They vary in diameter, they vary in straightness. So when you lay out your pole construction, you can be a bit lateral with your plus or minus. What I tend to do is on the base, this outdoor area we've got here, and the bridge is built out of poles. This outdoor area has 16 main poles in it. The 16 poles become the base of the structure. Now I string line it out as you would do a normal building. Square up your string lines, mark your holes, and then it comes to the tragic bit where you put the poles in the ground and one pole's 4 inches, one pole's 5 inches, one pole's 8 inches. Well, when you run your string line through, you might have got your holes dead straight, but obviously your poles are not going to be, they're not going to cooperate, so let's say. So what you have to do is use a little bit of lateral thinking and imagine your poles as just piers. The tops of poles, and I'll show it up there on the tops of these poles. The tops of the poles have usually a larger surface area to build the rest of your building off. Roofs, for example, like this one. It has a larger surface area than what you need to sit your timbers on. So you can pick up a lot of the run out that you have in your marked poles on the ground, and when you've concreted them in and they're, you know full well that one pole's 20 mil out of line with another one because of the thickness of it. You can pick that up when you get to the top by just positioning your beams slightly off the center of the pole instead of smack on some mark. I made up that box structure, 200 by 50 beams all the way around, and I squared that up on top of the poles. That enabled me to build an orthodox roof. This is what I call a hybrid pole structure. I've actually had a little bit to do with full pole construction. They get a bit out of hand. What I like to do is put the poles in for most of the vertical structure and then put orthodox building methodology on top. I hand build my own trusses out of just normal treated pine. But yeah, look, your poles are just something that you have to, put away a little bit of the orthodox thinking. Mark them out, dig them in the ground 450 mil, just like a normal footing. Concrete them in as normal. Treat your plain timber poles or use treated pine. But then start getting back to orthodox methodology once you get up above the poles. When you go to fill in between poles, and we actually thought, we toyed with this building, it's quite large. Like I said, there's, oh, gee, I actually don't know how many poles, 2, 4, 5, there's probably 30 poles in this whole damn thing. It's a very large structure. We toyed jokingly way back, just turning this into the main house. And the footprint that this whole structure sits on is about 12 squares, so it would have made a pretty good house. And I've worked on the old compressed mud floor buildings. You can put, you know, just compressed mud sealed as a floor. But anyway, look, we kept this as the outdoor kitchen. Bottom line as far as construction goes is be a bit lateral with your thinking when it comes to a pole. It's not going to cooperate. If you're like me, I like to measure things pretty accurately. Accuracy goes out the window really to some degree with this stuff at ground level. Pick up all of your runouts as you build on top of them. Get your poles as close as you can on the ground, and I mean, don't be 4 inches out. You know, if you can keep it within a couple of inches, you're going to be able to pick up anything you build on top of it by just placing the beam slightly off center or whatever. So that's pole construction. Pole construction also requires tools, at least one major tool, and mine's still sitting down there, just there, the dreaded chainsaw. Now when it comes to pole construction, excuse the mess too, I'm still building. I've got my tools scattered everywhere because I'm building around the back, as I've said 100 times. When it comes to poles, generally if you're going to build something large, you probably want to use 6 to 8 inch poles or something that magnitude. Those they won't cooperate with your average power saw. You could go through them with a handsaw, and I've got plenty of sharp bow saws in there. Yeah, you can do that if you're a bloody hero. Well, me, I use what's called chainsaw technology. Now, chainsaw technology means that when you deal with a pole, I put my poles in, I shoot a level. I get my laser level out, my builder's laser level. Once all the poles are up, and I set nails at about 1 metre high all the way around at one level. Then I measure vertically from all of those nails to get my higher levels. And that way, all the beams, all this stuff up here, all stays absolutely perfect. Alright? You wind up with the top perfectly level, perfectly straight, and it all comes up looking good. It may not look like it when you start, but it does. If you just maintain that thinking, that you set a level off the poles that are in the ground wherever they wound up, and you take the heights and you use your chainsaw to trim them all off. Now with chainsaws, if you're new, and again if you're an old fart like me, you've probably got plenty of experience with chainsaws, chopping a pole off, you know, on the top of a step ladder can be dangerous. So look, you know, if you've got no experience with a chainsaw, I suggest you go out in the paddock or go somewhere and get some practice with a chainsaw. Get used to the fact that they kick. Get used to the fact that they won't necessarily cut. Try and make a few nice straight even cuts on a mark that you put on a piece of wood, but test that out on the ground before you go jumping up a ladder with it. No one wants to see you in hospital. Chainsaws can do some pretty mean damage to people. But I use chainsaw technology when I do things like rebaiting. I've got a couple of rebaits. I'll focus on one over here. There we go. There's a rebate. Now that means the beam is rebaited into the pole. I set that level from a nail that I sat down low, measured up to get the level so that that pole is level at that cut point with everything else around the building. Those levels are set by a laser. I don't do that with a, you know, I don't sit around the fire and invoke the devil and do it some mysterious way. It's just set with a bloody laser level. So put your poles in, cut them all off with the chainsaw if your poles are too thick for your power saws. You can run around them with a power saw if you've got an 8 1/4, and those things are a bitch too. So again, if you're new, don't just pick up a 9 1/4 power saw and hack in thinking you can go around it like opening a can. Take it from me, you know, 9 1/4 power saw, when it kicks back, it can do as much damage as a bloody chainsaw. So when you're up on the top of a pair of steps dealing with your poles, be careful, okay, is all I'll say. So yeah, pole construction, great methodology. I love it. They look great. Perfect for outdoor structures. I'd really like to build a whole house out of it. And we probably would have if we hadn't come across the EPS as an alternative for this one. But yeah, that's it. I put an orthodox roof on this one. As I said, trusses. all nicely measured, all even, very simple. I'm only going to talk about the poles in this one, and the main thing with poles is do your mark out as you would just mark anything out. Square it off, diagonally square it off, make sure everything's as straight as you can get, and then set a level point at somewhere. It can be a foot off the ground, 2 feet off the ground, about the middle of the pole I find is good. Then you can measure upwards to the tops to find your top levels, and then just build in an orthodox manner above that. I call this post and beam because what we have is a post, and the orthodox style post and beam just has a large structural member that winds up holding everything else up. Right, so it's post and beam. Remember, you can, if you're going to sit poles on top like that, you have to fix them down. You should strap them down. You can't just sit these things on top and hope they'll balance there through the next big wind. You might think there's a lot of weight in it, but you know, wind can be pretty wild on a roof this size. So you need to go to some effort and put some straps on it when you're finished or as you go. But yeah, that's pole construction. One of my favourite types of construction because it looks quite natural, and it's quite ironic really that I turn around and build in EPS in the main building. We over in the flat over the other side there have orthodox stud wall construction, and in here we have pole construction. So there's 3 different methodologies going here. Things like the shed are built in an orthodox manner, but I do love the poles. They just take a little bit of lateral thinking. Do your mark out, dig your holes, make sure the material you're using with isn't going to be munched up by the termites. And I know for a fact that you don't have to do much with a treated pole. I've pulled treated poles out of the ground that have been in 10 years, and the termites, for some reason, just leave them alone. They just don't like the taste of the stuff. You can put cypress in. Cypress is another one. Termites just don't seem to like the taste of it for some reason. But yeah, so anyway, that's pole construction. Orthodox trusses over the top. Gives you a nice straight structure, and from the outside, when you look back, you know, I know a lot of pole construction people go orthodox the whole way with all poles and pole rafters and stuff, and they all wind up looking fantastic, you know, no one's going to argue that. But what I like is a mix of the two, which gives you, at the end of the day, as I break my neck tripping over things in the garden, at the end of the day you wind up with a nice level straight building sitting on very natural looking material. And it's a great combination, even down to a bit of colour bond around the base. You can use pine, you can slice your own boards, but you can get a great look happening with poles. So if you're looking for something that's cheap, an average pine pole, about 25 bucks, they're not too bad. And buy them straight off the shelf, bang them in the hole, you got it done in a week. It's really good, and lay out as big a structure as you want. And one of the other beauties of pole construction is you can do a large footprint like this, which is 12 squares, that outdoor area, growing area and kitchen. But you can do it, and what we thought of doing was just sealing up one section, and pretty much just, you know, whether you use infill in natural material or infill in mud brick or infill with straw bale or infill with EPS. You can seal up one section as long as you've got all your poles in. You know how big your build's going to be. You know the plan that you've got in mind. So you can do one section, move into it, and just build the rest as you go. So I do like pole construction from that perspective. Most orthodox building, you'll find that people put all the stumps down, put the bearers and joists down, and then all the walls go up. That process can be costly if you haven't got the money, and if you're new and you are struggling, perhaps pole construction might be something that interests you, just from the way you can sort of leave. You know, the poles won't cost you a fortune. You can put 20, 30 poles in, it won't cost you an arm and a leg, but you'll be able to sit back, have your cup of coffee at the end of the day or your distilled water, and look at it and go, well, that's how big it's going to be, and then only proceed to seal up a quarter of it, and just add the rest as you go. And once you get to, you know, like I said, roof height, you might only seal up, you know, a couple of squares, a couple of building squares, a ye old container size, you know, 20 by 8. You might only seal that up, and within a very short period of time, you're going to have somewhere to keep the rain off your head, go to sleep at night without the wind blowing through your tent, and just wake up every day and look at the rest of your poles. These poles here, The main pole sat in the ground for about 4 years. This is the second property, obviously, and we sort of started farting around with it a long time ago. But these poles were in the ground 4 years, and we used to come down here and go, yep, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Lots of planning, lots of thinking. But the point is that really we got the poles in, and it gave us the picture, it gave us the enthusiasm, it gave us the base for where we were heading, knowing that we weren't going to get, you know, moving on it straight away. And once we finally moved down here, because the poles were in, that's the yucky bit, I call it. Kerry calls it the yucky bit. We live in central Victoria, so the ground is like steel. It is seriously like steel. It defies post hole diggers. Crowbar material this, but I think I've mentioned that before in a video as well. So yeah, pole construction, very easy to do, pretty quick to do. Lots of versatility. Gaps between poles, as you can see, can be filled in or not filled in, screened, shade clothed, panelled, filled in with hay bale, filled in with mud brick. The mud brick pole combination, I've worked on quite a few projects like that, not my own, other people's. They work well, but for the moment what you need to do is perhaps think that your budget might only encompass the ability to buy a bunch of poles. Well, buy your poles, mark it out square on the ground. Don't think about your roof, alright? Everything's in components. Don't give yourself a headache thinking about this stuff. This stuff comes later. Mark your ground out. Make sure your mark out is square. Then the lateral thinking moves in, as I said. Your runouts, you will see the runouts from your poles. You might put a pole in dead square at the base, level it up with as close as you can get with a spirit level. But when you get to the top, might be 20, 30, 40 mil out of line. Don't have a heart attack over it. If the majority of the pole is dead straight, just keep telling yourself when you stick your laser level on, or whatever you're using to level, and you cut the tops off, that you have a dead flat platform to do the rest of the orthodox build above. So you'll have a nice looking roof, nice square flat roof. And then you only got to deal with, well, for instance, that gap there between that pole and that pole. You can wake up one morning, well, bugger me dead, we're going to fill that in with what? Well, we'll fill it in with whatever you choose to do, because that's not my job. But that's all you do. Once your poles are in, you can go, oh, well, we'll get some hay bales and we'll do a hay bale wall there. And you might want to do a mud brick wall on that one. That's the beauty of it. Get all your poles in. Don't be scared. I mean, an absolute non-skilled person can get a crowbar and dig a hole. Get some string. Maybe you might have to brush up on your geometry so as you get things square as you can on the ground. That's not real difficult. I don't believe that's beyond you if you're thinking of tackling a build. So get the base square, drill your holes, put your poles in, stand back and go, honky bloody dory. Now I know where I'm heading, I know how big it's going to be, but I would advise you to put all your poles in, pick the bigger picture, even though you can't afford to finish the bigger picture, pick the bigger picture and do what we did here. 30 poles later or more, I'm still round the back. These ones I showed the other day, I'm still filling in the back of the kitchen. This is a skillion roof that's going on the back of this, a straight pitch off the building, off these end pieces of shade cloth. Whoa, glare. But yeah, so we're still even extending to the final extremities of this building, even though the inside's done. And we're still working on the floors, obviously. I'll be really glad when all the tools are cleaned up, but all you people, I think it's good for people to see the mess. One inherent issue with building your own stuff is you have to create a mess to create heaven, alright? Heaven will not come without a mess. It just doesn't happen. The two live and coincide alongside each other. You want something pretty, make a frickin' mess. I tend to clean my messes up at the end of every day. That's just my methodology. You may be a messy bugger. That's alright, as long as you can work within your mess, that's good. But you know, the cleaner and tidy you can keep it, I find, the more enthusiastic you stay. Especially when you're doing, you know, additions bit by bit. When you look outside and you go, yep, oh, there's that pole. I know I've still got a cement mixer there because I'm still doing cement, you know, rendered floors and stuff. But yeah, you should be able to look at your job and go, yep, well that's where the next bit comes to. If you keep that relatively tidy, you'll be enthused to move on to it. So put your piles in, take it step by step. If you've got any questions, again, feel free to shoot us a message. Posting it up, yeah, shoot a message, well, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to put a little section on this on our website, offthegridnoz.com. Just the versatility of pole construction. By the way, pole construction isn't readily accepted by council. They will, you know, with a bit of push and a lot of permits and a lot of structural engineers getting involved, costing you an arm and a leg, they will do it. But if you're genuinely like full-blown off-grid and you haven't got the full set of permits, this is a good way to go. Because another little side benefit of this, these structures, I've said this before, fall under non-habitable space. Whilst they're poles, no one's going to say jack shit to you. Alright, you can even bang a roof on it. What you've got is just a big rotunda or a large veranda or an open hay shed. That's tantamount to what it is until you start filling it in. So to settle into your new block, if you're potentially not following all the rules, let's say, and I'm not suggesting that you do that, but if you are in that category, put your poles in, because no one's going to bitch at you, no one's going to pick on you, no one's going to say squat, usually. Whack your roof on it. This might take you, 6 months to do. That gives you and your property time to settle into your area. And if at some stage in a year's time, when you finally get around to starting to seal it all up, well, what you have there or had there a year ago is sort of settled into the area. People are used to it. People know that you've got a pole construction down the back, looks like a shed. You know it's going to be a palace. That's your bloody business. That's your plan. That's your sovereignty enacted. You have your plan. Go about in stages so that people don't take too much notice of it. And yeah, she's not a bad way to go. So anyway, that's the first one on pole construction. I'm going to leave it at that. And it's cheers from Steve and offthegridnoz.com. And as usual, as I say, I'm getting back to what I have to do now. I'm not going to sit down and have a cold distilled water, although I'd like to. But no, I have my poles outside still to deal with today. Bit of framework got to go up. So, okay, cheers from us for now. Subscribe, like, share, all that stuff as usual. Usual ending. One day I will change the intro and the ending, but maybe Kerry likes them. Oh, I hate hearing my own voice. Alright, so that's pole construction. I'll leave it at that. Send me a message, put a post up. It's a really interesting way to build. I suggest you at least have a good look at it, make your own mind up. Don't be swayed by what I've shown you. Don't be swayed by what other people have done. Assess your own skills, assess your own needs, assess your own situation, make your own decision. Usual drill, guys. That's pole construction, video 1. Cheers for now. Bye.